Dinky Doo was spending the afternoon in the cozy little clubhouse of the cutiemark Crusaders, nestled just on the edge of Sweetapple Acres. Sunlight streamed through the wooden slats of the walls, casting soft golden stripes on the floorboards as the three fillies huddled together inside. Apple Bloom stood proudly at a makeshift podium, an overturned crate with a cutiemark-themed cloth draped over it, while behind her, a whiteboard leaned precariously against the wall, covered in enthusiastic but chaotic sketches of potential cutie marks. Apple Bloom was mid-speech, her tone thoughtful and earnest as she addressed the small purple unicorn filly sitting cross-legged on a rug. "So, Dinky," she said, glancing back at the whiteboard before turning her attention back to her guest. "We gotta figure out what your special talent might be. What kind of things do you like doing the most?" Dinky Doo brightened at the question, her pale yellow eyes sparkling. "I really like baking with my mama," she said cheerfully. "Sometimes we make muffins together. I also like coloring in my books and drawing little doodles when I'm bored." Apple Bloom's face lit up in admiration. "Well, ain't that sweet?" She turned to look over at Sweetie Belle, who had been unusually quiet. "Hey, sweetie, did you hear what Dinky just said?" Sweetie Belle didn't respond. She was staring at something on the windowsill, her eyes unfocused and distant. Apple Bloom's smile faded. She stepped down from her crate podium and trotted gently across the clubhouse floor. Curious, Dinky followed her, her little hooves tapping softly on the floorboards. She leaned in behind Sweetie Belle to see what she was staring at. Sitting there on the windowsill was a slightly faded photograph in a cracked wooden frame. It showed Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, and Scootaloo, grinning wide and standing shoulder to shoulder. The picture had been taken on the day they'd all earned their cutie marks, right after they'd helped Diamond Tiara find her voice and stand up to her high and mighty mama, spoiled rich. Apple Bloom stared at the photo, her ears slowly drooping. The room fell quiet. Apple Bloom cast a sideways glance at Sweetie Belle, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "You miss Scootaloo, don't ya?" she asked, her southern lilt carrying a warm drawl of concern. Sweetie Belle didn't speak at first. She just nodded slowly, her lower lip trembling as she stared down at her hooves. A soft sniffle escaped her as she blinked back the tears gathering in her wide green eyes. "It's been 4 weeks," Sweetie finally said, her voice cracking under the weight of her sorrow. 4 weeks since Scootaloo vanished without a trace. I still can't believe she's really gone. It's like one moment she was with us, smiling, laughing, and then nothing, just silence." She paused, squeezing her eyes shut as a tear slipped down her cheek. "I feel horrible for her mom and dad, her aunties, and Rainbow Dash most of all. She was like a big sister to Scootaloo. I can't imagine what she's going through. It's so unfair. We just got our cutie marks, all 3 of us. We were supposed to face the future together. Not like this." Without a word, Apple Bloom stepped closer and draped a comforting foreleg around her friend's shoulders. She gave her a gentle squeeze, her own chest tight with emotion. "I know, sweetie. I miss her too," she said softly, her voice thick with sadness. "But I still believe she's out there somewhere. Scoots is one of the bravest ponies I've ever known. If any pony can fight their way out of trouble, it's her. Maybe she's trapped, but I know she ain't given up. Not Scootaloo." A moment passed in silence before Dinky Doo, who had been sitting quietly across the room, finally spoke. Her ears were drooped, and her young face held a mixture of fear and curiosity. "I've heard about the disappearances around Ponyville," she said, her voice hushed. "Some of the older ponies in town say there have been others missing too. Not just Scootaloo. My mom told me the Royal Guards, the police ponies, and even Princess Twilight are all investigating, but they haven't found anything. No clues, no hoofprints, not even a strand of mane." The room had gone quiet, the kind of quiet that felt heavy, like a thick fog rolling in through the windows. The only sound was the soft, uneven sniffling of Sweetie Belle, who sat with her ears drooped and her eyes red-rimmed from crying. The warmth of the clubhouse, once filled with laughter and hopeful chatter, now felt cold and still. But then, Apple Bloom's voice broke through the silence like sunlight cutting through a cloudy sky. "But hey," she said, her tone brightening with determination. Both unicorns lifted their heads, glancing toward her as she stood tall, eyes steady and full of spirit. "We shouldn't be letting all these disappearances drag us down. We gotta stay strong. We have hearts as strong as horses, and right now, we ought to be focusing on helping ponies like Dinky Doo earn their cutie marks. Sweetie Belle sniffled again, but this time she wiped her eyes with a hoof and gave a small, shaky smile. Slowly, she pushed herself up from the floorboards. Apple blooms were right, she said, her voice a little wobbly but growing steadier with each word. She turned to Dinky with soft determination. We should put all our attention into helping other fillies and colts find their special talents. That's what the Crusaders do. Dinky's face lit up at the encouragement. Her horn glowed with a warm yellow aura as she lifted her saddlebag from the corner of the clubhouse, where it lay beside the others. She slung it over her back, her eyes shining with excitement. Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle followed suit, strapping on their own saddlebags as a new energy filled the room, one of hope and purpose. Apple Bloom gave a quick nod, her signature pink bow bouncing as she turned toward the door. We could trot on over to Sugar Cube Corner, she suggested with a grin. See if the cakes or Pinkie Pie need help baking something. Maybe Dinky here's got a knack for muffins just waiting to be discovered. Dinky beamed, her whole face glowing with enthusiasm. That would be so amazing, she squealed, practically bouncing in place. Let's go! With that, the three fillies bolted out of the clubhouse, hooves thundering lightly against the wooden floor. They galloped down the ramp and out into the golden afternoon, their laughter trailing behind them as they raced off toward Sugar Cube Corner, hopeful that today, maybe they'd help Dinky Doo find her destiny. After a long afternoon filled with laughter, sugar, and more than a few kitchen mishaps, Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, and Dinky Doo stood amidst the flour-dusted chaos of Sugar Cube Corner's kitchen. The air was thick with the sweet scent of freshly baked muffins, buttery crusts, and warm cinnamon. Mixing bowls were stacked haphazardly on the counters. Spatulas leaned precariously against stained cookbooks, and stray splatters of batter clung to the cabinets like colorful polka dots. The three fillies were nearly unrecognizable, coated head to hoof in a mess of flour, egg yolk, and sticky globs of pastry dough. Their manes were streaked with powdered sugar, their aprons crusted with frosting and pie filling. Out in the front of the shop, Mr. and Mrs. Cake, alongside Pinkie Pie, were carefully loading boxes full of baked goods into a cart parked by the curb. A stout earth stallion waited outside, hitched to the cart and ready to pull the deliveries to the search volunteers scouring the nearby woods and meadows. Inside, Dinky spun in place on the flour-dusted tile floor, her yellow apron flaring out like a sunflower as she tried to catch a glimpse of her flanks. "Do I have it?" Dinky Doo asked breathlessly, excitement shining in her yellow eyes. She stopped mid-spin and looked toward her friends, hope bubbling in her voice. "Do I got a cutie mark?" Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle turned from the window, both tugging off their sticky aprons as they approached. Dinky's apron remained on, still swaying from her spinning. Sweetie Belle leaned in, peering at Dinky's flank, then gently shook her head. "I'm so sorry, Dinky. It's still a blank flank." Dinky Doo's ears drooped, and her bright smile faded into a quiet frown. She sighed and glanced over just as Pinkie Pie came bouncing back inside through the swinging doors, a wide grin on her flour-dusted face and a large box of bread balanced on her back. "Thank you so much for all your help, girls," Pinkie chirped with a squeaky bounce. "The search volunteers are gonna be super-duper grateful for all these muffins, cupcakes, and pies, and when every pony comes back safe and sound, hooves crossed, they'll have a big old table of treats waiting for them." She set the box down with a little hop and added proudly, "I even decorated the cupcakes extra special, just in case some pony's having a hard day. Sugar and frosting can do wonders for the spirit." She then turned her bubbly attention to Dinky Doo, beaming at her with a sparkle in her eyes. "Oh, and I heard your mum, Derpy Hooves, is bringing over her super-duper extra special muffins once she finishes baking them." "Special muffins?" Apple Bloom echoed curiously, tilting her head as she and Sweetie Belle looked over at Dinky. "What makes your mama's muffins so special?" Dinky shrugged, a little bashfully, and gave a small giggle. "I don't really know. All I do know is they're really, really yummy. I help Mama bake them sometimes, but she never lets me watch when she adds the secret ingredient to the mixing bowl." She paused, then added with a small smile, "She said once she's sure I'm ready, she'll tell me what it is." "Oh, I love mysteries," Pinkie Pie said, clapping her hooves together. "I bet the secret ingredient is love, or marshmallows." Or maybe super crunchy toffee chunks. Dinky giggled again and gave a little nod. Pinkie Pie's ears perked up as she suddenly gasped, her whole body giving a cheerful bounce. "Oh! That reminds me," she exclaimed, turning toward Dinky with her usual boundless energy. "Dinky Doo, could you pretty please go check on how the muffins are doing back at your house?" Dinky's ears twitched at the mention of her mother's baking. She nodded once, but before she could move, Sweetie Belle stepped forward, a note of concern in her voice. "But Dinky..." "What about your cutie mark?" the white unicorn filly asked gently. "Don't you want to stick around and try a few more things with us? You could earn it today!" Dinky glanced down at her still blank flank, her yellow eyes reflecting the flickering light of the warm bakery kitchen. For a moment she looked torn, but then she straightened up, her expression calm and sure. "That'll have to wait, Belle," she said quietly but firmly. "The muffins are more important right now." Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle exchanged a brief, understanding look. Then they both smiled and stepped forward, each giving Dinky a light nuzzle of encouragement. "All right, Dinky," Apple Bloom said softly, her voice laced with admiration. "We'll be cheering for you." "Good luck," Sweetie Belle added, her tone warmer now. Dinky gave them a grateful smile before turning and galloping off through the front doors of Sugar Cube Corner, her hooves clattering lightly on the ground. Dinky Doo trotted quietly through the heart of Ponyville, her small hooves tapping softly against the cobblestone paths as she passed by cozy thatched roof houses, bustling shops, and the sweet aroma drifting from open bakery windows. The afternoon sun filtered down through drifting clouds, casting long shadows across the village. Her path led her past the familiar town bulletin board, its surface nearly buried under layers of parchment and weather-worn notices. She slowed to a stop, her yellow eyes scanning the tangled collage of flyers, many of which were the same. Missing posters. Each poster bore the image of a different pony. Mares, stallions, even young colts and fillies. Beneath the photos were printed names, last known sightings, and a contact number for the Ponyville police force, urging any pony with information to come forward. The wind stirred one of the papers gently, making it flap against the board with a soft rustle. Dinky's heart ached at the sight. The missing flyers weren't just limited to the bulletin board. As she continued walking, she saw them taped to storefront windows, pinned to lampposts, even stapled to fences. Every corner of Ponyville seemed to bear silent testimony to the growing number of ponies who had vanished without a trace. One particularly tattered poster caught her attention, tacked to the charred remains of the once beloved Golden Oak Library. The tree, blackened and hollow, still stood like a ghost of the past. Affixed to its scorched trunk was a worn, slightly curled poster bearing the image of Scootaloo, her confident grin now a painful reminder of happier times. Scootaloo, the brave Pegasus who was once part of the cutiemark Crusaders alongside Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle. Dinky Doo's ears drooped and her gaze fell. A lump tightened in her throat. She took a deep breath and turned away, trying to push the sorrow from her mind as she made her way home. Soon she arrived at the modest cottage she shared with her mum, Derpy Hooves. The warm, muffin-scented memories usually associated with the house felt unusually quiet today. Dinky used her horn to envelop the front door handle in a gentle yellow glow, nudging it open and stepping inside. The familiar creak of the hinges greeted her, followed by the quiet click as she closed the door behind her. She levitated her small saddlebag from her back and hung it neatly on the coat rack by the entrance. "Mama, I'm home!" she called into the stillness of the house. "Oh, and Pinkie Pie wants to know how the muffins are coming along?" Dinky Doo trotted toward the kitchen, expecting to find the oven humming and the air filled with the scent of her mother's secret recipe. But the room was empty. No trays sat on the counters, no mixing bowls were in sight, and the oven was cold. Not a single muffin had been baked. The lavender filly paused in the doorway, her brow furrowing. "Is Mama still at work?" she wondered aloud, then glanced toward the far end of the hallway, where a small door stood partially hidden behind a curtain. Or is she in her secret cellar again? The one she built years ago when I was just a foal? Dinky Doo clearly remembered that strange day, not one she could ever forget. It had started out like any other, until she was sent home from school early due to an unexpected plumbing issue in the classroom. She'd arrived at her cozy little cottage just after noon, her saddlebags still full of schoolwork. As she stepped into the kitchen to grab herself a glass of juice, She froze mid-step. The sight before her made her breath catch. Her mother, Derpy Hooves, stood near the far wall of the kitchen. A section of it Dinky had never paid much attention to. There, a door stood ajar. One Dinky had never seen before. It was narrow, old, and partially hidden by a hanging rack of pots and pans. Derpy was emerging from it, holding a large metal bucket draped with a cloth. The fabric was soaked through with dark red stains that immediately caught Dinky's attention. Her young mind raced to explain it. Juice, maybe? Or paint? But something about the way her mother moved made her uneasy. Dinky thought just for a split second that she saw an orange feather tangled in her mother's usually tidy blonde mane. Or was that just her imagination playing tricks? The moment Derpy noticed her daughter standing in the kitchen, she flinched, wings flaring wide in alarm, and almost dropped the bucket. Her golden eyes widened. Without missing a beat, she raised her voice, not harsh but firm. "Dinky Doo, sweetheart, go upstairs, right now. Don't come down until I call you, please." Confused and a little frightened, Dinky obeyed. She climbed the stairs without another word, though her mind swirled with questions. What was that door? What was in the bucket? Why had her mother looked so startled? When she was finally allowed out of her room much later, the house was warm with the smell of freshly baked muffins. Her mother greeted her at the bottom of the stairs with a bright, innocent smile. Her coat squeaky clean, wings folded neatly. The mysterious door had vanished, as if it had never existed. No sign of seams or hinges on the kitchen wall. It was as though the whole thing had been a strange dream. Over the following weeks, Dinky asked her mother about the hidden door. Every time, Derpy deflected the questions gently but firmly. "That's where I prepare my secret ingredient for the muffins," she said. "But you must promise me, Dinky, never go down those stairs. It's dangerous." When Dinky Doo worked up the courage to ask about the red stains that had once covered her mother's gray coat, Derpy had simply chuckled and pointed to a tray of vibrantly red muffins cooling on the counter. "It was just food coloring, sweetheart, for these, see?" The muffins were bright, almost unnaturally red. But even as a filly, Dinky Doo couldn't quite shake the thought. Food coloring doesn't usually splatter like that, and certainly not in quantities enough to cover a pony's fur. Despite her mother's warning, Dinky's curiosity grew. Over time, she started quietly investigating the kitchen whenever her mother was out. That's when she found it. A single tile near the back of the room that was loose. Beneath it, she could just barely make out the edge of something metallic, perhaps a latch or hinge. Her heart pounded with the thrill of discovery. That had to be it, the way into the secret cellar. But before she could pry the tile further, or explore more, the front door creaked open. Derpy walked in, carrying a heavy-looking duffel on her back. Her cheerful smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Out of the kitchen. I need to work and I don't want you to see my secret ingredient." Without argument, Dinky Doo left the kitchen after that. Dinky Doo knew she wasn't supposed to go down there. Her mother had been very clear, stern even, but something felt wrong. She told herself she wasn't going to enter the cellar, not really. She just needed to take a quick peek, make sure her mama was all right. A glance, a call, then she'd shut the door and pretend she was never there. With hesitant steps, the lavender filly approached the corner of the kitchen where she'd discovered the loose floor tile. Her yellow magic glowed softly as she gently lifted it from its place, revealing the small red button hidden beneath. Dinky blinked at it. She pressed it with the flat of her hoof. Click. Suddenly, with a low mechanical hum, a concealed door swung open from the wall. Dinky Doo jumped back with a yelp, her heart skipping a beat. The door had blended in so seamlessly with the kitchen wall that she'd forgotten exactly where it was. Now it stood open like the mouth of a dark cave. Swallowing her nerves, Dinky crept forward and peered down the staircase that led into the cellar. The shadows seemed to stretch endlessly into the gloom. "Mama?" Dinky Doo called softly, her voice trembling just a little. Silence. The little unicorn waited, ears perked, but no voice answered her back. She exhaled slowly and turned to close the door, until a sudden blood-curdling scream cut through the silence. She flinched. It was a mare's voice, every muscle in her body tensed. Panic surged through her veins, and before she could stop herself, Dinky Doo was galloping down the stairs, hooves clattering against the old wood. Her only thought was that something had happened to her mother. She had to help. She had to know. As she descended, a noxious stench rolled up to meet her. Thick, putrid, and suffocating. It clawed at her throat and curled her nose in disgust. It smelled like rotting cabbage, old garlic, rancid trash left under the summer sun. When Dinky reached the bottom step, her hooves halted with a sharp thud. Her breath caught in her throat. The room before her was a nightmare made real. Massive meat hooks hung from the ceiling, each one supporting what remained of ponies. Skinned, headless, limbless. Their bodies were little more than husks now, reduced to unrecognizable shapes of exposed flesh and bone. Blood, both dry and fresh, was smeared across a metal work table at the center of the room. Lining one wall was a tall wooden shelf displaying rows of skulls. They varied in size and shape, some large, clearly adult, others heartbreakingly small. A few had been painted in soft pastel colors, remnants of the coats they once matched. Most were bare bone, bleached and lifeless. Nearby, framed on the walls like grotesque art, were delicate pairs of severed filly wings, spread and preserved like butterfly specimens. But the most horrifying piece of the room was a hook near the entrance. Dangling from it was a long scarf, not made of wool or fabric but carefully sewn together cutie marks. Each one had been flayed from a pony's flank and stitched in a neat line. Some still bore traces of their owners. Bits of fur, the curve of a flank. Dinky Doo stared, too shocked to cry, too horrified to run. A choked gasp snapped her from her trance. She turned and saw Lyra Heartstrings, bound and hanging from a meat hook, suspended by her forelegs. The unicorn mare writhed in terror, her eyes wide with pain and fear. Her mint-green coat was matted with sweat and dried blood. Her horn, snapped clean off, left a raw wound on her forehead. Nearby, a metal trolley gleamed under a hanging light bulb. Upon it lay a scalpel, a cleaver, a hacksaw, and a long knife, all crusted with blood. 2 large metal buckets sat beside it, each one streaked red inside. Dinky Doo's mouth fell open. Her mind screamed at her to move, to run, to help, anything, but her legs felt like they were made of stone. "Dinky! What the hay is all this?" Lyra Heartstrings screamed, her voice cracking as she struggled against the rusty meat hook embedded in the shackles binding her hooves. Her mint-colored coat was damp with sweat and her wild golden eyes darted around the room in a panic. "What are you doing here? What is all this?" I have no idea," Dinky Doo whispered, her voice trembling like the rest of her. Her ears pinned flat against her head, and her hooves fidgeted nervously against the cold, grimy floor. "I didn't know this was under my mama's house. I swear I didn't—" "What?" Lyra shrieked again, her voice rising into a desperate wail that bounced off the blood-stained walls. Dinky Doo winced as if the sound itself had struck her. "This was under Derpy's home?" Lyra was now hyperventilating, her sides heaving with shallow, panicked breaths. Her horn flared for a fleeting moment, an angry spark of golden magic, but it fizzled out with a pop, leaving her crying out in pain. A crack of burnt horn flesh sizzled at the edge of the broken stub. Tears poured down her cheeks. "I never knew anything like this was down here," Dinky murmured, her voice small and hollow. "Mama always said not to go near the basement. She said it was where she kept her secret baking ingredients. She never let me in." Her golden eyes wandered slowly across the gruesome chamber. The sharp metallic scent of old blood mixed with the stomach-turning stench of decay and rot. It burned in the back of her throat, but something compelled her to keep looking. Every shelf, every corner, every grotesque item in the room had been arranged with disturbing precision. Her gaze lingered on the bone-white skulls neatly lined on the shelf, some large, some painfully small. Each one had been polished, some painted in bright, innocent colors. Wings pinned like artwork in frames lined the wall, their soft feathers dulled by time and air. And hanging on a single hook, closest to where Dinky stood, was the scarf. It was made of cutie marks. Each patch had been expertly stitched together, the seams almost invisible, the colors eerily vibrant. Despite everything she was feeling, fear, confusion, disbelief, there was a strange, inexplicable tug of curiosity. Something in her wanted to touch it, to feel the stitching, to understand how something so awful could look. Beautiful. "Dinky, listen," Lyra gasped from her hook, drawing the filly's attention again. "You need to leave now. You need to get out of here and tell the guards. Tell some pony." Dinky opened her mouth, unsure if she was about to agree or argue, but the words caught in her throat. Because then, hoofsteps echoed down the staircase. Both Lyra and Dinky turned toward the sound, frozen. At the top of the stairs, cast in the dim yellow glow of a flickering ceiling bulb, stood Derpy Hooves. She wasn't wearing her mailbag anymore. Her mane was slightly unkempt, her gray coat dotted with faint streaks of flour, and something reddish-brown that didn't look like jam. One of her golden, mismatched eyes focused on Dinky, the other seeming to drift toward Lyra. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Derpy blinked and smiled. "Whoa, Dinky, these muffins taste amazing!" Apple Bloom exclaimed, her eyes going wide as she took another bite of the warm, fluffy treat. "I swear this is the best thing I ever tasted!" The fillies were all gathered in the cutiemark Crusaders clubhouse, the late afternoon light casting golden streaks across the wooden floor. Dinky Doo stood proudly beside the little table, levitating a plate of muffins with her soft yellow magic. There were 6 in total, perfectly baked, apple-scented, and lightly dusted with sugar that sparkled in the light. "I made them with my mama last night," Dinky Doo said proudly, her golden eyes glimmering with excitement. She carefully held the plate of 6 warm, perfectly shaped apple muffins in her soft yellow magical aura. The aroma of baked apples and cinnamon filled the little wooden clubhouse, mingling with the faint scent of the outdoors, wafting in through the open window. She let me help mix in the secret ingredient too. I even got to choose the flavor, and I picked apples since your family gave us that huge basket, Apple Bloom. "Well, shoot, that explains it," Apple Bloom said with a cheerful drawl, taking another big bite of her muffin. Crumbs clung to the corners of her mouth. "Ain't nothing makes a muffin taste better than Sweet Apple Acres apples. Dinky, these are downright heavenly." Sweetie Belle, seated on a cushion near the window, used her green magic to sneak another muffin from the plate when she thought no one was looking. She took a delicate bite and let out a soft hum of delight. "Seriously, Dinky, these could win a baking contest. They're warm and soft in the middle, and the cinnamon just pops." Dinky beamed, her small chest puffing with pride. Watching her friends enjoy her creation filled her with a sense of accomplishment. And something else. Something darker and more twisted that she kept buried deep behind her smile. The clubhouse was cozy and quiet, the wooden walls decorated with old CMC drawings and adventure plans. A soft breeze rustled through the trees outside, making the place feel peaceful, until Apple Bloom broke the moment. "Hey," Apple Bloom said, her tone changing as she finished chewing. Her ears drooped slightly. "Did y'all hear about what happened with my cousin?" Sweetie Belle froze mid-chew and looked up. "What happened?" Dinky turned to her too, still holding the plate aloft. "Yeah, what is it?" Apple Bloom sighed and shifted on her hooves. "I overheard Applejack, Big Mac, and Granny Smith talking in the kitchen last night. Granny got a call from Sunflower Seed. She's Bab's big sis up in Manhattan. She said Babs didn't come home from the arcade. And now she's been reported missing." Sweetie Belle gasped, clutching her muffin with wide eyes. "She's missing? That's awful!" Dinky blinked, her face tightening just slightly before she caught herself. Her heart didn't skip a beat, not out of worry, but out of memory. She knew exactly what had happened to Babs Seed. She and her mother had taken her. She remembered the screams, the pleading, the cold steel table, and the smell of cinnamon mixing with something else, something metallic. The muffins Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle were eating now. Well, they were sweeter than any pony knew. And yet her expression remained soft and controlled. She lowered the plate slightly and gave a small, practiced pout. "I'm really sorry to hear that," she said, voice gentle and sympathetic. "I really hope she turns up safe." "Me too," Sweetie Belle whispered, now visibly shaken. She pulled the uneaten half of her muffin closer, staring at it for a moment before taking a small bite. Apple Bloom nodded slowly, frowning. "Yeah, sure hope she's all right." Dinky Doo sat down beside them, setting the plate between them as the sunlight filtered through the window, highlighting the dust particles drifting lazily in the air. Her golden eyes flicked from one filly to the other, calculating. She tilted her head ever so slightly, hiding the twisted thoughts circling in her mind. "If it ever happens to you, Apple Bloom," she thought darkly, "I think I'll bake you into apple cinnamon muffins." And Sweetie Belle? Raspberry vanilla would suit her just fine. But aloud, Dinky Doo simply smiled and nodded. "Until Babs comes home," We should stick together. Keep each other safe. The two other fillies nodded, their hearts heavy with worry, completely unaware of the predator quietly sitting among them.